Are you struggling with binge eating and feel tired of the endless cycle of restriction? In this video, you'll discover the science behind your cravings and how to achieve balance and peace with food. If you haven't subscribed yet, click that subscribe button and hit the bell in the top corner so that you're notified every time I post a new video about binge eating, emotional eating, and how you can live with food freedom. I'm Meredith McKenzie. I'm a binge eating therapist, intuitive eating coach, and the founder of the One Body to Love program. I've helped hundreds of women to end the binge restrict cycle and to learn to eat intuitively. Before we dive in, a quick disclaimer. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered a substitute for a psychological evaluation or assessment or any type of intervention or treatment. Let's start with a scenario I hear in my office all the time. Maybe you start the morning with something you feel is a good breakfast, and then you go to work, you got stuck in some meetings, maybe you eat lunch a little bit late, and by 3 o'clock, you're either really hankering for something, you've got these intense cravings for something sweet, something probably a little higher calorie, or you're feeling just sluggish and tired. Maybe you're bored, maybe you're just checked out from work. And by the time you get home from work, you're hangry. You are ready for dinner. But the length it takes for you to make dinner and what you have on the menu just doesn't feel appealing. Maybe that's where your binge eating cycle starts. You start snacking on things as you're cooking dinner and you start to feel a little bit out of control there. Or maybe it's after dinner. Once the kids have gone to bed, you're sat down in front of the TV and the freedom is there to be eating. Whatever it looks like for you, the binge eating typically happens later in the evening. It's emotional, it feels like you can't stop it, and you just ride it out until it's over. By the end of it, you feel filled with guilt and resentment to yourself and say, I can't let this happen again. I need things to change. And then the whole cycle continues despite your best efforts. That's what we're going to be talking about today, the binge restrict cycle and what is happening scientifically, biologically, and psychologically for you so that you can have more power over it. Now, this is something you might be able to relate to, but for so many of my clients, figuring this out feels so confusing. No matter what you try, you still seem to struggle. And one of the biggest reasons for that is that the binge restrict cycle and what's happening for you is actually both a biological and a psychological process. So even if you're changing your behaviors, you can't change your biology, you can't change your psychology without more extensive processing work. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. What many people don't realize is that this cycle actually starts with a phase of restriction. And as you're watching this, you might be saying, but I don't restrict. I am not purposely trying to eat small portions or to not eat enough food. I'm trying to eat reasonably. And I want you to take whatever version of restriction might apply to you and think about that throughout this video. Restriction looks all different ways for different people. It could be eating very small portions and not getting sufficient nutrients in your day. It could be cutting out specific food groups. So then again, you're not getting enough nutrients to be able to feel satiated. Or it might be psychologically you're saying to yourself, I shouldn't be eating these specific foods, so I'm going to eat really clean or I'm going to eat really purposefully, and you kind of put blinders on to those other foods that you think you shouldn't be eating. The problem is that that creates a sense of deprivation, and we'll get more into that, but recognize that this cycle starts with restriction. On a biological level, whenever you finish a snack or a meal, your stomach will go to work in digesting it. And once your stomach has finished its process of digestion, your blood sugar levels are going to drop and your insulin levels are going to drop. This is then going to signal to your gut to release a hormone called ghrelin. And ghrelin is responsible for letting your body know, hey, we're out of food. We need to start considering when we're going to get this next round of food. It sends a signal up to your brain to release another hormone called neuropeptide Y. Neuropeptide Y is responsible for all of the hunger signals that you're going to experience, and it sets you into action, seeking out and looking for this food. This might look like that grumble in your tummy or the thoughts about food that keep coming into your mind as you're trying to pay attention to your work. Even as you're cooking dinner, you're starting to think about what's in the pantry and there's something out there for you to eat. From an evolutionary standpoint, the purpose of these hormones is to put you into action looking for food. If you didn't have this motivation to eat, you might get sucked into doing some other thing, paying attention to people around you or projects that you're working on. You wouldn't be able to keep yourself sufficiently nourished or energized if you didn't have that motivation for food. Psychologically, our bodies also reward us for eating food. And this is something in our limbic system called the reward system, where if we eat something that tastes specifically good, usually those are higher fat, higher calorie foods, where they are going to reward our system and we're going to release dopamine, which says to us, this feels really good. I like this feeling. So when I eat these foods, I get this release. I'm going to do that more often. From an evolutionary standpoint, this is actually really helpful because if we are in a famine state or resources are particularly limited, we're going to know that if we find those foods that are higher sugar content, higher carbohydrate, higher fat, that we are going to get that reward. It's going to feel good, but it's also going to be the best bang for our buck food-wise because we don't have to put in as much physical effort to get them, but it ends up nourishing our bodies and giving us a larger amount of energy. So internally, we have 3 different hormones that are going on at the same time and that are motivating us to find food in these moments. Now, we've been talking a lot about evolution, but let's bring us back to modern day. In our modern lives, we have our daily schedule. Either we're waking up and we are eating a specific meal, maybe we're skipping breakfast, maybe we are on a specific meal plan that prevents us from eating certain types of foods, or you're just in a hurry and you grab something quick and you don't give it a lot of thought. Then we head into a very stressful work environment, whether that's at home. And for many organizations, food and taking breaks away from work isn't prioritized. I've heard of many clients who are expected to work at their desk or take long meetings in the afternoon and maybe skip over their lunch. So our modern lives don't necessarily set us up to be successful in meeting all those biological needs or attending to how our evolution has set up our bodies biologically and psychologically. What this ends up looking like is we maybe aren't eating sufficiently, we're cutting out certain food groups, or we're not getting enough of certain nutrients. Maybe we're missing meals altogether. We're not having those snacks in the morning between breakfast and lunch, or we're taking our lunch late. And so we're going probably several hours between meals or snacks, and it's just increasing all of those hormones that are going to be really driving us to get the next meal. So as we restrict, whatever the rationale is behind why you're restricting in those moments, whether it's intentional or because of your schedule or you take it from there for yourself, the ghrelin in your body is increasing. The neuropeptide Y is increasing. And because it's been several hours between meals or snacks and you're in this stressful environment of work, you are going to have a reduction in dopamine levels, which sets your body up to say, I need to feel good. I want that hormone. Let me do that with food. You have all of these hormones working together in unison to be able to encourage you to eat. When people say to me, I don't know why I lose control, it's like something takes over, and then they end up blaming themselves because of a lack of willpower, I just want to remind you and them that no, this is the way your biology has designed you to find food, seek out food, and particularly those foods that are going to give you the better bang for your buck, the higher calorie, higher fat, higher sugar, carbohydrate content, because it's what's going to reward your system, particularly when you've gone several hours without eating sufficiently. And this is the point where the women that come to me will say, and this is my fault. And they end up being incredibly hard on themselves. And I want to remind them to be compassionate for what it is that they're going through. So I want to know from you, what are your favorite positive affirmations or ways that you remind yourself to be compassionate with yourself in these moments? Leave a comment in the comment section down below and help inspire others watching this. Next, in the binge-restrict cycle comes the binge, and how you define that might look different, but I will post a video here for you to look at of what the real definition or what the clinical definition of binge eating is. But it comes after this restriction phase. So for many people, that will start around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It can start a little bit later, but it follows that period of restriction. Remember again, this is either a physical restriction where you're restricting yourself biologically and the ghrelin and the neuropeptide Y are really high, or it can even be a psychological restriction. And in that sense, the binge can start earlier in the day because that sense of deprivation is so intense that once you need that emotional boost, you're going to start going for it. So I want you to think of the binge phase of the binge restrict cycle as the opposite or the complementary to the restriction. It's the response that your body has for that period of restriction, and it's going to do whatever it can to help you find some balance. The problem is, it's not a refined or intellectual response. It's something that is very evolutionarily based. So you are going to fall into that binge heavily. You are going to try to get the food as quickly as possible. So in our scenario, that might look like starting at 3 p.m. hunting for the closest vending machine. Or it could be while you're making dinner and it turns into snacking on all the things and not having a well-balanced dinner. That often continues on later in the evening when there's that freedom. You might have eaten even a really, sustainable, yummy dinner. And now psychologically and biologically, your body is still hunting for more food. For many people, this looks like choosing foods that typically you might not, whether that's because these foods are considered off limits to you and something that you really don't want to be eating, or they might also be foods that don't really fit into what you consider to be a typical snack. For some people, that might look like spoonfuls of peanut butter or eating several slices of plain bread, where it's not particularly tasty or, set out that you would really like to enjoy this, but it feels like you've got this ravenous energy behind it that you need to have food now and that you just grab the closest thing. In these moments, you're more likely to eat far more than you ever intended, to feel almost though you're losing control or that you've had this outer body dissociative experience, and you're not able to really attend in those moments to your fullness cues as they're starting to come on. Your body, your stomach within it has nerve cells that are going to censor and say, okay, we've had enough, and then send a response up to your brain to say, okay, let's send out those fullness cues. But the problem is, because you have deprived yourself over a longer period of time, your body is just moving at such a fast pace that it's not able to attend to those things. The other piece on a psychological perspective of things is that in order to go through the day and to be in this restrictive phase and to probably on your end be like, I don't think I'm really restricting, that must mean that you are not in tune with those hunger cues that your body is sending you. You are ignoring them, you are dampening them, you are shutting them down, turning away from them. And what that means is that you are probably then also more likely to not attend to many other cues. This might look like, I'm stressed out. I don't attend to my body's stress because I have to do this work that is in front of me. Or I am really tired, but I'm going to push past those tired, sleepy cues because I want to stay awake, or I have to do work, or I've got family obligations. So as a society, we are really great at ignoring the cues that we have for things that our body needs. And so the same will be true for our fullness cues. You're just not attending to those cues that your body is giving you anymore. So what that means is that you'll likely end up eating far more than is even physically comfortable for you. At this point, you're not even really tasting what it is that you're eating because, again, you're not attending to your body's response to those foods. Instead, it's a very I need to get this done now experience. What ends up happening on an emotional level is devastating in these situations. You might feel a little bit of excitement, a little bit of relief that finally I get to have these foods, but really the heaviness of the guilt and the shame and the regret and the disappointment in yourself is incredibly heavy. And while we talk about a restrict binge phase, I like to add in this aftermath phase where it's this time of personal reckoning where you're starting to say to yourself, I'm incredibly disappointed with this. And that's where the self-blame comes in, where you start to try to make promises to yourself that things will be different next time. I can't continue with this. And just like the inward self-hatred really happens in these moments. For some people, this might end up looking like repeated binge eating because it ends up creating, several binges within the same day or a couple of days of binge eating, all through self-punishment because you're feeling so negatively about yourself. It can also feel like, I had this streak or this period of time where things were going so well, and then I let it all go. I made the mistake. I messed up. And so this self-punishment can just be like, well, what the heck? I might as well just keep eating. And the binge cycle continues, or the binge phase of the cycle continues over a longer period of time. In the aftermath phase, though, there eventually becomes this time where the sense of deprivation has gone down, and the self-blame is so high that you end up making a promise of, I'm not going to do that again. Whatever's going on for you internally, whatever those food rules look like, it usually involves saying, okay, I'm going to tighten up and I'm not going to do those things again. And it leads into another restriction phase, which most people are not aware of. They consider this, them being good, them doing the right things for themselves. And this is the most disheartening thing for me to see as a binge eating therapist, because I just see my clients setting themselves up for failure again, which I don't see it as a failure, but they do. And it's just so difficult to see them have to go through that. So I want you to consider that this is a biological response. You have all kinds of hormones that are in play in this. That starts with the restriction phase where ghrelin, neuropeptide Y increase and your dopamine decreases, all encouraging you to really go into a binge phase. Then you start eating more. Your body doesn't have a chance to really catch up because the speed or the rate that you're eating at is so intense. You get this very quick emotional release and relief feeling. And then all of the heavy emotions come back on. You end up eating far past your fullness, and it feels really uncomfortable, both physically and emotionally. But the cycle continues. So the first thing you need to do in order to stop or end this binge restrict cycle is to recognize the biological and psychological factors that are playing into this, and to recognize that it is not a matter of willpower. This is not something that you should fault yourself with. It is exactly the way your body was designed to respond to food and deprivation, and you're doing the same things that hundreds, thousands, millions of other women go through. And this is not something that you need to be blaming yourself for at all. Taking that step back and having compassion for yourself is the very first step in ending this cycle. Now, if any of this resonates with you, I have a guide that's available to you for free. I'm going to put the link in the description box down below. And it is my 5-step guide to ending binge eating at night. It is comprehensive. It is great little stepping stones for you to start with. You can grab it and start it tonight. And I hope that you get it and start learning more about yourself and your own binge restrict cycle. Thank you so much for watching. And if you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel so that you never miss a video. I'll be posting regularly about how to overcome binge eating and learn to eat intuitively. Be sure to hit that notification bell so you never miss a video when I post one, and check out these videos that are going to help you with your journey towards food freedom. I'll see you in the next video.